This is session 2 of our spring clinic. We have David Starnes with us today. Before we get started today, I want to show something that I was able to get up and running yesterday. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So if you can see this, this is the MCBA web page at this point in time on the home screen. And I put a couple of new icons here, one for responding to COVID-19 and one for the spring clinics. Both of these direct you to the resources page. So we're going to go to that page right now. Yep, and it's working. Little slow here this morning on that. Well, since it's not moving very quickly, I think it's probably using a lot of bandwidth on this Zoom conference. It doesn't want to move ahead to the next page. I've got set up on the director's zone under resources, a section for responding to COVID, and there's a number of resources there. One of them is the MHSAA guidelines for reopening the schools and athletic contests, something that will be attuned to, I'm sure. But you can find those there. And then also you can, under the spring clinic section on that page, you can find the videos from the first clinic. Here we go, this is the resources page. You can see spring clinics, we have part 1 and part 2, and this is the materials that were presented. And then if you go down responding to COVID, you can see that there's stuff here from a number of different organizations. This is stuff that was presented on the Music for All webinar that happened about 2 weeks ago. And then here we have the MHSAA, a link to their website and a letter there and the document that they released yesterday. So there's all that information there for you on the MCBA website. At this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to Juno. Juno's going to do, Juno, are you with us? You can turn it over to Juno. He's going to do a little intro of David and we'll get things rolling. Juno, you there? Dave Armbruster, do you want to introduce Dave?
Yeah, just very quickly again, if you weren't on last 2 weeks ago, it's our pleasure to have Dave Starnes
Why
here.
am I not Larry?
Oh, there's Juno.
Go ahead.
All right, just again, I'm just going to turn things over to Dave Starnes, who's currently the Director of Athletic Bands at Western Carolina University, and who's also the Director of Bands for a number of years at Kennesaw Mountain High School. And we're going to turn things right over to him right now.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen here and we'll get rolling. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to MCBA again for having me. William and I had a great time with you guys 2 weeks ago and hope that information was of some use to you. And we felt really good about the clinic and loved the interaction. I think Chuck's going to be moderating questions this morning. So if there's any question that you want to pop up in the chat, when we get to a break point, this is a lot of information. I'll tell you that up front to cover the field music and the ensemble sheet simultaneously. So I'm going to go pretty quickly because I do want to get to your questions. And all of this being presented in the format that, we still don't have a lot of answers about the fall. I presented to CBDNA yesterday about some similar kinds of things. And, everybody's kind of in the hurry up and wait game until we know, where things are going to lie, and understand that Michigan's still in a really restrictive environment right now. So my thoughts are with you guys as you plan your fall season, and hopefully this information we can share and you can kind of log back. Just to give you kind of a perspective, I broke this up into the music field and music ensemble sheet, but because we have directors and evaluators in the room today, I wanted to give you just some bullet points on each sheet and some that actually overlap a little bit, which I think that's important because we're all here for the same reason, and that's the students. So in terms of the sheet, I'm sure you've all seen this, and I've got it posted here, and then we're going to go in depth with it more on the next slide. But from the evaluator perspective, I think it's really, really important to establish your credibility through education, and that's self-education for yourself, like knowing what a great sound is, what a acceptable blend is, what an acceptable quality and resonance of sound is, the differentiation in articulations, understanding stylistic things. That's all the things that the field music sheet's asking for. So I'm on both sides of that fence. You know, I judge for Music for All, I judge for DCI, and I'm also a band director. And when I was the director at Kennesaw, and I'm sure you guys have done this too, that are on both sides of the fence, and some that maybe, you know, are on one side of the fence more than the other, but you have to put yourself into those zones of really what it is that your job is, but seeing it through the other lens of whatever the other side of that fence is equally important, I believe, because that's where the education actually comes from. You know, back in the day, we used to have the tick system, and it was like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. That's all we ever really talked about, particularly on the field music sheet, whether it be a wind sheet, a brass sheet, or a percussion sheet. It was all about everything that was wrong. And our posture nowadays, it's all about education. It's all about not only educating the director and also educating the students, but it's us having that credibility by educating ourselves. And I think that's very, very important, consistently, and continue to learn through time. So as far as the evaluator perspective, I think of it in two ways. I think of my process when I'm judging field music as the micro. I'm focusing on the individual. I'm looking at posture of why a tone may be sharp or flat. I'm looking at embouchure. I'm looking at hand placement. I'm looking at the physical nature of how they're carrying themselves, and do they look different when they're standing still? When they start moving, does the sound change? So I'm looking at the individual aspect of that. From a macro section, I evaluate segments, okay? If I can see an inconsistency in one, I look and see if that inconsistency is across the spectrum of the section, because that usually gives you information to say, this is a methodology issue. This is not an individual issue. This is a teaching and a methodology issue, or the loss or displacement of addressing that particular issue within segments. So first bullet point for the judges: the judge must consider his or her pedagogical knowledge when evaluating the performance. And I don't know how many of your judges in the state of Michigan are still active performers or active musicians, or probably active band directors, but always consider that, you know, the what it is that you know, before you can tell someone how to fix something. Bullet two, the judge should consider equal sampling of all musical elements on the field, as well as the time element in which to do so. And that one's a hard one sometimes, because we can get fixated on a trombone section that doesn't play well in tune, or we get fixated on a really good woodwind section that we want to spend a lot of time with because it's inspiring to hear students perform at that level. But really, you know, I look at it as if you walk through a buffet at a restaurant, you got to equally sample. You can't just eat the chocolate pudding. You got to go back and get the salads. You got to get the things that maybe you don't want to spend as much time with, but at the end of the day, you should have sampled everything. And that even goes for percussion too. I know that, you know, when people sometimes go like, well, here's brass and here's woodwinds, and then, okay, I checked the box for the percussion. I've done enough of that. Because the percussion is really the hardest to sample if you're doing a field sheet. Because you've got to sample the snare segment, the tenor segment, the bass segment, potentially the cymbal segment, and then the front ensemble segment. So there's really 4 minimal segments, sometimes 5, that you have to sample for the percussion. So you have to build that into your allotment from your evaluation from the beginning to the end. And obviously get the woodwinds and get the brass, but get in there with get the percussion as well. That's that credibility piece I talked about. I used to really love hearing people's field sheets that did that kind of time, maximizing their exposure and their sampling. It would be really disheartening to me if I never heard one percussion comment, or if I never heard one woodwind comment, and the judge spent all their time in the percussion and the brass segment. So you got to be real careful about not falling into that trap. And then the third one, I think, is probably the synopsis of all this, is every segment of the music ensemble requires your critique. Those of us that are band directors that would spend Monday morning playing recordings, judges' tapes for our students. I can remember many times, because one of the things that we did is take out a piece of paper and I want you to write the comment down for your particular instrument. And there were many times that students would come up and say, they said one thing about me, that was it. One thing about my section, that was it. Or they would say nothing about their section. So I think that's really important. Again, if you put yourself on the other side of that fence as a judge, to say, what am I offering the entire ensemble? And it may be one comment, it may be two comments. I'm not asking you to give a diatribe, but when I see judges standing on the front sideline, not really moving around or even, repositioning themselves, I wonder what kind of feedback, the full ensemble is getting. Now let's flip the tables a little bit on the field music sheet. From the director perspective, consider your performers' expectations and the expectations you have of the performers. So many times when I do field, whether it be on a DCI show or whether it be for a VOA show or a state level show, access to the performers from a director standpoint is crucial. You don't want to build walls to get to your performers and then expect that the performers did not get the feedback or the sampling. And that happens a lot, particularly from a standpoint of like where the color guard's staged, okay? Or where you might have props, okay? You really need to be able to get to them. Creating a percussion feature at the front hash and building 20 color guard people in front of them spinning flags, the judges, from a safety standpoint, probably doesn't want to even go there. Okay, so you got to be really careful about creating the evaluation zone, and I think it's important to bring the performance to the evaluator if you really want them to have that opportunity to interact with your students. Clear the palette, bring the performance to the judge, and that's a thing that if the judge isn't there, that's on them. But giving them access to that, I think, is really important. The second part of this is establish access to the musical elements, as I'm saying, and consider placement of the set pieces and the color guard staging relative to the musical moments. Now, we're using a lot of soloists on props nowadays. And in order to get to that soloist and that prop, sometimes we have to weave our way through instruments, instrumentalists and percussionists to be able to get there. But again, that's a really, really important aspect of this, that if you're going to put a player up on the prop, that you've got to still be able to get to them or get near them to be able to sample that. And remember this is probably one of the most important things, and I hear this from band directors all the time. Remember, the field level focuses only on the individual and segment performers. This is not an evaluation of the ensemble. And that's a big one, because, we've all done this, and I know I've done it. If you've done a prelims final show where you get down on the field and you have a really clear identification of what that ensemble is, and then that night you get upstairs and it's a completely different read. Or it could happen the other way around. Upstairs, you think they're really good, and then you get downstairs and you get to the individual and the segments and you realize we've got some pretty significant performance issues and maybe even some methodology issues. So be really careful as a band director and as a judge to not put yourself in that ensemble aspect of things, because it really can change. And you don't want to anticipate what might be happening upstairs and what you're hearing downstairs. You might hear commentary. I'm going to leave that for my upstairs counterpart in music to comment on. Or I'm going to leave that on my downstairs person to comment on, because it may seem out of context to you where you are on the field, but it might be correct upstairs. So you have to be really careful about falling into that. And I say that because with the increase of electronics, when you're on the field, amplification can really distort your read. And so I think that's really, really important that you identify that. Now,
Dave, let me
yes,
interrupt. A great time
sure.
to ask this question.
Yes.
A question come in. How do we deal with or should deal with electronics when judging field?
Perfect. Well, the electronic thing becomes for me more about timing. Becomes more about the, like if it's a keyboard player, are they playing the correct pitches, right? And you can tell that. You can tell right notes from wrong notes. You can tell that from a sample. If the sample goes off in the middle of a phrase and it seems, out of character to where that is. One of the things, believe it or not, that I check out is from a rule standpoint of a music field sheet. I know going into that show what the rules are from an electronic standpoint. And I'm very, very careful about looking at, are they sequencing this with the touch of a button, or is it in real time as the rule book might say? And I might walk over to the T&P guy at the end of a show and say, you might check this out. This is just a warning maybe, but I'm not sure they were doing that in real time. That could have been a sample, whatever the rule is. So I never evaluate volume from the field level ever. I don't think you can do that because it's completely different upstairs. It'll blow you out down on the field level, but it might be correct upstairs. So I think more than anything, it's about the technique of which the performers are playing the electronics. It might even be a choice on the field as far as timbre of selection of patch or selection of sample. Okay, it could be even one of those, just in terms of if you're trying to blend with the woodwinds, that sound that I'm hearing coming out of the front ensemble is going to take over that woodwind sonority. And it's not a blend and balance thing as much as it is a sonority thing. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide here. This is the sheet again, okay? But I'm just going to break this down into what your criteria says at the very top of the sheet. So from the evaluator perspective, in each subcaption, we're being asked to consider what is being performed and how it is being performed. And so we're talking about the what and the how in both of those aspects of things. I'm going to take this to an evaluator's perspective one level more and say, when identifying performance issues, consider why the issue is occurring. Okay, so we're talking about what is being performed and how it is being performed. Let's talk about why the issue is occurring and suggest a pedagogical solution. Because I think that's where, as a judge, you really gain your credibility. That if you know that the embouchure is wrong on that clarinet player, or you know that the flutes are not using parallel posture and you're getting a very airy tone, if you know that the bari sax is playing really, really sharp, and you can identify why that might be. And those are just examples. A brass player that is playing with an instrument that's less than parallel, I noticed this from some of your brass players as far as where their upper body position is, which is encumbering their airstream, causing tonal issues, causing fuzzy sound issues. Those are the kinds of things where I think if you can suggest the solution to the pedagogical issue, people want your feedback. They don't go, oh my gosh, we've got that judge again. We go, we get to hear that person's feedback. And I used to, if I'm going to use like Dale Warren as an example. Dale's a dear friend, but he is a pedagogue and a half when it comes to a field level performance. And if I would see going into a performance coming up that weekend, we're going to have Dale Warren on the field, you can bet that we really focused heavily on those aspects of pedagogy that week because I knew he was going to comment on it. And I looked forward to that. And I wanted to impress, our performance on him and say, look at, the growth that we've had since the last time we saw you. And then from the director perspective, when it comes to the music field issue, and I use this even in concert bands, and I think if you put this in place, whether you're marching bands or your concert bands or your chamber ensembles, I call it the law concept because we think of singing as law. It's at least a musical abbreviation. But their process should be listen, analyze, and adjust. Listen, analyze, and adjust. And it's really more the what, how, why, as far as the performer's aspect of things. So we're listening, there is a problem, analyze what it is, why is it happening, and then how do we fix it, okay? And so I think those are really important. That law concept is so crucial to get your ensemble better. Put that in place as a director to say, we're being evaluated on what, how, and why from the director or from the judge's standpoint. Kids don't care about that. What they care about is, are you listening? Do you know why the problem's happening? And can you fix it? Okay. And it's really educationally the same thing that the judge is being asked to do that the performer should be doing on an ongoing basis. Okay. All right. So from the field music sheet, okay, from the evaluator perspective, this is the back of the sheet now. Okay. Understand that the criteria defines the center of each box, okay? That is not to get into that box or on the top end of that box to get out of that. You're thinking dead in the middle of that, and you guys have those tick marks right in the center of the box, which I really, really love. But that criteria defines that center of the box. And the reason that is because that's the sliding scale. You know, how close to the center of the box does that criteria define you? And it's a little bit below center. So my number can't be right in the middle of that, okay? Or the same thing on the top end. And that should be a sliding scale to give you leverage to say, it's below average in box 3, but you're closer to average than you are poor. And so you slide that scale up and find out where that midpoint is. But again, that defines the center of the box. Number 2, educate yourself on what aspect of the caption delineates criteria for each box, okay? And I love that you guys have on your sheet already bolded across the board there about, you know, what those things are. And that particular adjective is consistent throughout that box. You see that word below average or above average consistently through that box. And it's important to know for your tolerance of what average is or what above average is. You know, we hear it all the time. Well, that's a really hard judge, or that's a really lenient judge. Just be a consistent judge. You know, if a box 3B number for you after performance, you know, 1 jumps to a box 4 number for the next one up, and then you get yourself quote unquote boxed in because you readjusted things and you move that scale too drastically between 2 groups, you just got to be consistent with yourself, performance to performer. And we're going to talk about numbers here in just a second. When creating your bottom line number, consider the total percentage of the sheet be the classroom teacher. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And this is a trick that I learned a long time ago in judging, and it really kind of took it out of the box and the criteria reference placement for me and put the teacher back in it. Okay, so if you have a, you know, whatever top box or an 8-8 in the top box and an 8-4 in the bottom box, and you add that together and you divide by 200, you're going to get a percentage. And you look at that percentage and you go 87.5, whatever it is. And you go, that's pretty close to a 90. And when I look at where a 90 total is on the back of the sheet, that's pretty high up in, what is that, box 4B for you guys? Pretty high up in box 4B. That's almost saying that they're a 5th box band. And they're really not that close. I'm too high. I need to go back in and adjust this. So that percentage becomes almost like, did the kid make an 87.5, which is a B plus in the classroom? Was that performance a B plus? No, it's closer to a B. In fact, it was a low B. I'm way too high here. And that gives you that adjustment to pull things down. I think the percentages help you rank and rate much, much easier than a number and a box criteria, because you can get boxed in those numbers. And I'm not saying falsely inflate or falsely deflate within boxes. I'm just saying make sure that where you are within each box, you're consistent with yourself after each performance. And that percentage might tell you, I'm only a 0.5% above that other group, and that other group was much, much stronger. This needs to change. I need to open up some space there, which will give you more numbers at the end of the day. From the director perspective, Take the time to teach from the field level. You might be surprised what you hear and see from a physiological standpoint. My staff at Kennesaw Mountain would tell you that I would spend about half of the rehearsal on the tower, and then I would turn that over to either a tech or one of my assistant directors, and I would go to the field, and I would spend a ton of time on the field. Number one, I wanted the kids to see me there. I wanted them to see me there because I wanted them to know that the micro mattered as much or more than the macro upstairs. And so I would spend time down there. The other thing it helped me was, why are we having this timing problem? And then I would get down on the field and go, oh my gosh, the trumpets can't see the drum major from this point. There's color guard in front of them. And so we'd have to go, okay, stop right here. Trumpets, you're going to listen back to the battery for these 16 counts. And that really told me a lot, going down on the field and watching from the student perspective some of the issues and challenges that they had. But for me, it created a lesson plan for the next day. Whether it was in the classroom or whether it was after school, we need to work on concert E flat, the third scale degree. We do not play the third of the chord in tune at all. Our G concerts are terrible. You know, so I would go back and I would reevaluate from the field level and create my punch list for the next rehearsal. Also, what you see could be students really having a challenge with a particular tempo. Usually for us, it was a ballad tempo, 1 cross 2, cross 3, cross 4, keeping a subdivision in the feet and pushing air at that same rate of speed, okay? So, or actually a faster rate of speed, obviously, than what the feet would be moving. So those are the kinds of things that really helped me to be down there. I never did a run through from the tower, ever. I was always down on the field, either encouraging kids, let's go, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up, or out there in the show and watching not just the segments, but watching the longevity of the entire run and feeling their endurance, you know, so it didn't drop off halfway through the show. Let's go, you got to keep pushing, you got to keep pushing. I became their mind on the field, okay? Second part of this, educate your students on the criteria of the sheet, as it can serve as a pathway to success and an opportunity to set goals, a leadership opportunity. I can't tell you the number of times I would take a BOA sheet. We didn't have a state contest in Georgia, but a BOA sheet, and I would put it on the overhead, and we would talk about the actual sheet, and then would flip it over, and we would talk about the criteria. It was amazing, especially for our younger members, for them to see, wow, there really is something more than just you're better than that band. There's actually grading. And I used to tell them this was their syllabus. You know, this is the syllabus for what they're being graded on as far as a marching band performance. The same syllabus they have in chemistry or biology or English or Spanish or whatever that is. This is our syllabus, and this is how we get a certain grade. This is how you meet a certain level of performance criteria that gives you a certain number equal grade. And that really opened a lot of eyes. And I think when we started doing that, it changed a lot of reason that we talked about what we did in rehearsal, why they saw that as being so much more important than what they may have otherwise. And then finally, we're always looking for, in music education, more than just the performance, the written evaluation. What can students do to write? And so I would typically make a writing assignment at least once a month, where we would give a sheet, a blank sheet out to everybody in the room. And let's say this is the music field sheet, okay? And we would play the music field recording from a particular regional or a particular show that we had. And the students would do a self-evaluation of that sheet, listening to the judge commentary, listening to some of the sounds that particular judge sampled on the field for that given time. It was amazing because you would see the faces in the room just like, oh my gosh, who was that? You know, the kids were all about wanting to make that better, but at the same time, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. If they were a clarinet player and they would hear a weird trumpet sound coming out of the recording, or even a really great performance, like a clarinet run that just stuck it and it was incredible. They were like, wow, listen how good that is. So it was all about them providing self-evaluation. And then I would call on students and say, okay, I'm not going to tell you the score that we got in this particular caption, but I want to see where you have us. And you would be amazed that 99% of the time, they scored lower themselves than what the judge actually gave us. It was a pretty consistent approach that's what happened, because they're so hard on themselves. And the reason I said that was a leadership opportunity, I made our leaders, our section leaders, stick to what it was that they heard in that recording. And they would have section meetings to say, these are the things that we're not doing well. You guys heard it on the tape. These are the things we have to get better. And in sectionals, those would be the aspects of things that they actually created their lesson plan for. Okay. So I think I'll stop right here, Chuck. Are there any questions about music field sheet before I move into ensemble?
I don't see any more out there right now. Let me just.
Okay.
No, not seeing anything. So.
Okay. 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 I'm going to move into go ahead.
There is one. It just says, please comment, provide feedback. If field music judges can comment on drill challenges, like you just mentioned, just not seeing the drum major and listening to other sections.
Yes. Okay. So I do believe that's important. And we're going to get to this even in the ensemble sheet as well. I think you have to comment on simultaneous demands. I think you have to comment on visual challenges, whether it be choreography or whether it be just fixed, static body movement or whatever. I guess I'm from the old school a little bit, that when I'm evaluating a music sheet, it's for me, it's like, I don't think you should get dessert unless you eat your fruit and veggies, and I feel like sometimes we force unnecessarily sometimes visual components and visual challenges on students that creates physical challenge before they can do primary performance of musicianship. And I see that with a lot of young groups, that they see, okay, nowhere on a judge's sheet does it say, do these aspects of movement and body. I want to see tendu, I want to see releve, I want to see first position lunge, I want to see this. It doesn't say that anywhere. It complements and enhances for sure. But without what we focus on in terms of the score, the majority of the score is based on the music number. I think we're really doing a disservice. So I think you have to comment on that challenge. And I think you have to comment whether that challenge is appropriate for the level of the performer, especially if it's a very, very young band, and a young band that's really struggling to even play notes. Or you'll see this a lot on an individual sheet, field music sheet, where the performer is like playing every other phrase and just dropping out, or playing like 3 notes in a phrase and dropping out. And every time there's a body or a lunge or maybe some sort of choreography, they just stop playing altogether. So I think those are the kinds of things we're sending. It's like, I'll put it back in teacher perspective. We're asking kids to take Algebra 2 before they can proficiently do Algebra 1. Now, is there a blend in that and there's an expectation? Absolutely, there's an expectation. So I think what we do is temper both. Maybe the music's not as hard, maybe the visual's not as hard, so both can be achieved at a higher level. Okay, I'm going to skip through that one because we kind of talked a little bit about the back of the sheet. The music ensemble sheet. Okay, so this is one that I really, really love judging, because I feel like I'm in a concert band setting, or I feel like I'm in a rehearsal setting with a marching band from the tower. And I think we have to approach this the same way. If the ensemble judge that's up in the booth, obviously, doesn't have this approach with them being on the podium, okay? You really have to sometimes block out what you're seeing, although the physical demands are there, and it could be attributing to some of the ensemble problems that we're having, staging, etc., foot speed, direction, those kinds of things. You really have to almost block this out. When I used to train the DCI judges, I would do this caption when we were doing training, and I would say, just close your eyes and listen to what you're hearing. And we would be playing a videotape for them as a training session. Close your eyes and listen to what you're hearing. Now open your eyes. Did the audio get better as a result of seeing what you were hearing? And usually the unanimous decision was yes. If I see it and I hear it, it doesn't bother me as much. But if I only hear it, it bothers me a lot. And here's the example of that. Take a DVD of a band, a marching band or a drum corps, either one, and watch it. And then when the opportunity comes back to just download an MP3 of it and you're listening to it in the car or through your phone or whatever, it's not as impressive because you hear things that you never thought were there because you're only focusing on the audio. So from the evaluator perspective, you were on the podium. The judge must consider his or her pedagogical knowledge when evaluating the performance. I maintain you should not judge ensemble music if you have never stood on a podium and conducted an ensemble or rehearsed an ensemble or been in a marching band situation where you've been on the tower and you've worked with a music ensemble. That's really, really hard to do. I don't want a dentist doing a plumber's work, and I don't want a plumber doing a dentist work. So I think you got to be really careful about who is judging music ensemble. There have been numerous times where I cannot wait to have a certain judge because I trust them so much. I mentioned Jay Kennedy a couple of weeks ago, incredible musical ensemble judge. Joe Allison, incredible music ensemble judge. Nola Jones, incredible music ensemble judge, because their ears are focused on the content, okay? You can tell real quick if a music ensemble judge is out of their comfort zone and they start making comments that are relative to the individual, that start talking about, I hear this person or I hear this person or boy, that particular sound stuck out or whatever. Those kinds of things can happen in ensemble, but you can tell they're not talking about the components of music ensemble, which is point 2. Listen to the performance, inside the performance, outside the performance, and through the sound. And here's what I mean by that. We judge sometimes music ensemble, the melodic content. The melodic content becomes the primary thing that we hear. But are we listening to the third of the chord or the root or the 7 or the 9? Are we listening through the sound? Are we hearing the inside out, right? So it's not just about the parallel fifth, it's about listening to that third, because that could be the problem with why the sound is not in tune. It could be the sound or the blend and the balance is out of character because of that, okay? And I'd say listening outside the sound, because with marching band, it gets really, really easy to discount blend and balance because the percussion section is so loud so much of the time. I am amazed at the number of times I judge music ensemble and all I hear is bass drum. And I don't know if you guys hear that or not, but particularly in a dome or even in a resonant outdoor stadium, it just gets to the point where that's really all you focus on. You have to listen through the bass drums to get to the sound. So listen from the outside and listen to what you're hearing first, okay? Is it percussion first? Is it electronics first? Are you hearing acoustic instruments first? So start on the outside and then go to the inside and listen to the actual content, right? The woodwind, brass, percussion content, and then start listening through the sound. And that's that stuff I'm talking about listening to blend and resonance and people playing in their trios or playing within their choirs, okay? Listening through the sound. That kind of goes with the next point. Ensemble is more than verticality. Equally consider the horizontal, okay? And verticality, is it in time? Is it in tune? Is it in tone? That's a pretty primary basis and primary approach to ensemble evaluation. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the musical sentence, okay? I don't hear a lot of people talking about the musical phrases or the peaks of those phrases or where we start dynamically or where we end dynamically, okay? I only hear about it's in time or it has great tone or it's in tune. That becomes the focus of music ensemble. But there's so much more, because even from a sonority standpoint, right? We have vertical sonority and we have horizontal sonority. And I think those are kinds of points that we need to not only educate ourselves on what those things are and how we understand that terminology, but again, that's just offering more information than the obvious, which it might be out of tune or it might be out of time. And then I said this, listen with your eyes closed, the reveal will astound you. And I challenge you to do that, even in this off season as you're preparing for the fall. Do that with a DVD. Just watch a DVD of a performance and hit mute, right? And just watch what's happening, and then unmute it, and then close your eyes and just listen to the sound. That's a great training ground for you to be able to know what your next steps are. And then from the director perspective, you're on the podium. This is one of those places where we align, I think, as an evaluator and a director. We're all listening for the same thing, or we should be, right? Consider the staging of similar melodic and rhythmic lines, right? And as a director, you would never put your tubas in the front row with your flutes and expect the tubas to play with the trombones that are sitting in the back of the room. So it's all about the staging and really considering the melodic and rhythmic lines and where they are within the placement of the stage. Consider the orchestration of the content. I think this is one of the biggest problems that people have in music ensemble. Maximizing the product on paper will benefit the achievement of the performers. Now, that's going to be tough this fall. And as I put that bullet point down there, I thought you're going to have a very narrow window to get this right. So if you are a director right now, you're looking at your music, you're looking at your scores, and you're looking at your players, and even potentially looking at the visual challenges that this could create, and say, is this going to be right on paper? Because you probably won't have a lot of revision time this fall. You probably won't have a lot of rewrite time. In fact, it could be none. So getting it right the very first time, I think, is very important. This is a big one, and it's kind of a mirror in my face as well, and I live by this. Mature sounds and musicianship should resonate from the classroom every day. The transfer of successful ensemble teaching in a concert band format will create a natural bridge to innate musical qualities on the field. I just did a clinic for our state in North Carolina last year about this. And it was really about, sowing your seeds in the spring so you'll have plants in the fall. There's too many people that do that the other way. They consider the beginning of the year the marching band season, and that's when you're going to teach. It can't work that way. You've got to be one season behind that. So you're creating pedagogy, you're creating ensemble skills, you're creating awareness to the music before you get to the place where it could change the most, right? Sitting down is the opportunity to get it right. When you start moving and teaching those skills, it's going to be way too soon or way too late, and you're going to be teaching two things simultaneously. Now, the freshmen, poor kids, they're going to be learning both. That's baptism by fire. But the other two, your upperclassmen, you've got that opportunity to teach that, and the freshmen can become a part of that system. And the last bullet point on this one is music first. Do not place physical challenges, drill body or choreography on performers who continue to develop from a basic level of musicianship. And that's what I was referring to before. I don't know, I can tell you that I've experienced in my own programs where visual designers wanted more from the performers than they were actually capable of doing in that particular moment. And I remember a particular performance, a particular moment in a teaching rehearsal day where I spent an incredible amount of time on teaching body that really count sequence wise didn't even really line up with the music. And we tried it and tried it and tried it and tried it. And I was like, scrap it, we're done. And it was bad because it was beautiful work, but it just didn't fit not only the musical counts, and it didn't really allow the students to make the best sounds. And I didn't apologize for that, because I think music must come first. I think that we must sound good for people to pay attention to the visual. Nobody would go to a marching band show to see a silent movie. They want to hear what that is, that outside beautiful music ensemble, and then from, you know, the visual component of things enhance the music. And it's like going to see a movie. Go to Star Wars. Not nearly as impressive without the soundtrack. And we listen to the soundtrack without the video. And I'm not saying that it's not important from a visual standpoint, but from the standpoint of understanding why we do what we do as music educators, that should be first and foremost. And I think all of us understand that, but that's just a reiteration of a belief that I have.
Dave, I want to interrupt a second here. We're down
Sure.
to about 10 minutes left before we got to switch over to our other one. Do you have a couple of questions out there? Dave Armbruster, will you look at the second one and see if there's points that haven't been answered there? The first question that we have that hasn't been answered is, how much do you adjust numbers for kids that are not playing? I think that's a little more of a field comment.
Yeah, and I consider that an achievement thing, and that's a great question, actually, because it could be a thing of you go, well, maybe this kid got cut from the park because they're not able to play it. And then you watch that student and say, wow, they're not playing any of this, you know? And I would never say it on a tape, hey, clarinet 3 from the left. They haven't played a note all the show, and, you know, we're at the 8-minute mark. I think I would say it's important to recognize the contribution of all performers within each segment. Please check the contribution of each performer in each segment from a consistency of performance. And just so they would be like, what could they be talking about? And then when they get down there on the field, they see that aspect's actually occurring.
The one that I'm looking at right now, actually there's some really good points in here. Just trying to read through it. Oh, there we go. Just talks about evaluating music ensemble as if it were a concert band, which they agree with, and suggesting listening with their eyes closed, isolate music only. It says, in our critique then, should we even acknowledge the environmental / movement challenges, staging, weather, proximity to drum major, drill demands, or velocity when offering suggestions for improvement? And it says, or should that be left to the field judge?
I think it's both. I think from a standpoint of a field judge, they're going to feel that velocity of that movement or the choreography or drill, whatever those expectations are, much more than the ensemble guy. I'm amazed that, like, when I'm upstairs and then go downstairs, how dense the drill is sometimes and how fast the drill is. And you feel like an idiot telling the kids earlier in the day, you know, you need to do this, you need to do this. You get down there and it's a madhouse, particularly with larger bands or with bands with large color guards. So I do think it's important. I do think that it's something that you consider on both sheets. It's simultaneous responsibility. It's physicality of what you're doing. And please understand, I'm not displacing what the visual component is to the music. But I would say the exact same thing is if the music either didn't enhance or caused the visual to not be successful, then something's got to be fixed with the music. And the same thing with the visual, that if the physicality of the visual detracts from the performer's ability to perform the music, then we need to compensate for that as well.
That's great. And then the second portion to this, which actually is another great question, says, additionally, how do you balance the demand of performance musically and visually with the quality of performance when scoring, i.e. how much credit is awarded for demand?
Oh, that demand word's scary because it's nowhere, it's inherent on some of the criteria, but it's not really one of those things where, you know, we talk about it as if you don't have a demanding show, you can't receive credit, you know, and I'm going to the back of the ensemble sheet because, you know, if you look across that sheet, I don't think on your sheet, and I've seen it on some state sheets, but I don't see the word demand. So I think we have to be careful. Yes, is demand inherent? Yes, because that's how we climb through the boxes, right? But I would say even more so on this year coming up, you better focus on achievement. The demand will take care of itself if the achievement is reached. And that's really about playing well, marching well, and creating all of the things that your show is asking for. Okay. A 4-cylinder car is only going to go so fast. An 8-cylinder car will go much faster than that. But if it's broken down, the 4-cylinder car just might race past it, you know? So I think you got to be really careful about using the word demand. That's a little antiquated because just because it's demanding doesn't mean it's good, right? And just because it's not as demanding doesn't mean it can't be effective or produce excellence. And I think I look at demand more worth replacing the word demand with excellence. Is this reaching the level of excellence that it could? Not is how hard is it to reach that level of excellence. And I know we're running right up against the clock here, so I want to go quickly through this. And the top part of this, from the evaluator perspective, is very, very similar to what we talked about in the earlier responsibility as far as the ensemble sheet. It's about the podium mirrors, knowing where the criteria starts, what separates that on the ensemble sheet, because it is different, obviously, and then creating that percentage again. From the director perspective, you must begin with a self-analysis. Through my teaching, my focus has been, this might answer some of the questions of why your ensemble score isn't where you want it to be. Rehearsals have been primarily geared toward what? And as an ensemble, our musical strengths are, our musical weaknesses are. No score should be a surprise in this caption if a year-long focus is based in strong musicianship. Like if you get great, you know, in concert band, you're getting, you know, Division II ratings or 3 ratings. I don't think you can go into the marching season in the fall and go like, I'm going to win the show musically. You probably know where your weaknesses and your strengths are, right? And the same thing is the other way around, that if you're really strong in concert band, you should have an expectation for what your students will produce in the fall, the achievement level that they'll produce, because it's already there. You've already taught it. It's the nuts and bolts of musicality, great tone, great musicianship, great listening skills, the law concept. They know how to drive the car by listening, analyzing, and adjusting. You don't have to be there. You've already put that in place. So I don't think that should ever be a surprise as far as what that is. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this. As a judge, evaluate through the perspective of a teacher. Be the teacher. Educate others, but you must be educated as well. And as a director, teach from the perspective that each day provides an opportunity to satisfy evaluation criteria without focusing on the numerical score. The better the teacher, the better the student. The better the student becomes, the better the teacher must be. So I think we're in this together. Obviously this fall, it's going to be a partnership as far as, you know, the students are our common denominator as a judge or as a director. That they are the common denominator. It's really super important that we keep that in mind, because every performance, every rehearsal that we get is going to be a gift. If it even happens, right? If it happens, it will be a gift to have that rehearsal, to have that performance opportunity, and maximize that, and let education be the centerpiece of what you're doing it for.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Everybody, this is the wrap up for our session 2. I'm going to be ending this meeting, and we all got to log back in on the session 3. With hindsight, I should have just set up one session for today and kept it running. But you know, when I set it up, that was the first time I set up webinars. So yeah. Have to bear with me on that. So I'm going to sign off. Dave, do you have anything you want to add last minute here?
No, I wish you guys the best. And thanks so much for having me in for these 2 sessions. I've really enjoyed it. And I hope it's been helpful. I wish you guys the best. As I told Dave and Charles, my daughter's going to be moving to Michigan. I'm moving her up there in about a month, and she will be one of you. So I may call on you to go check on her and take care of her or whatever. But thanks so much, guys. It's been my honor. And if I can ever do anything to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay, I'm going to
Bye-bye.
sign off, and then we'll get in on the other meeting. See you, everybody.
All right. Yeah.